Test 1, 2. And when you get there, you buy what everybody else is buying. If they're buying toilet paper, you buy toilet paper. Okay, test 1, 2. Okay, test 1, 2. Awesome. You showed up. You pressed play. You're actually in this video. You are part of the 1% that actually buy a course and actually press play and start the course. You know how many times I've done that where you buy a course, you have the best intentions, but you can't even get in, but you showed up. You are here. In fact, you're part of the 1% of the 1% of the 1% because probably only about 1 out of 10,000 people will do anything to get their families prepared for emergencies, and you're here. Awesome. You are part of the round peg in the square hole club. So that means that you actually are doing the right thing. So I can't tell you how many times before 2020, before all the pandemic stuff happened, that people would come up to me and say, man, what do you do for a living? And I say, well, I do emergency preparedness. And they go, oh, you're one of those. And I go, yeah, you want to hear more about it? And they would unscrew their ears just like magnets, stick them on the fridge until I was done talking, and pop them on and say, oh, that's awesome that you do preparedness and everything else. But what happened in 2020 is all of a sudden it switched. Instead of saying, oh, you're one of those, they started saying, oh, you're one of those. And people started calling me and getting excited. So now we're, where we used to be the nerds of the industry, the preparedness people, now we're the cool nerds, right? Like back in the 80s, nerds used to be really bad, but now all of a sudden they're cool. That's preparedness people. People are doing preparedness are cool, survivalists, preppers, all that stuff. Now, what's interesting, if you're in this course right now, obviously you're either just getting started, you've been doing it for a little bit and you want to get better, or you're pretty prepared, but you want to just kind of hone your skills. Either way, whether you're just getting started in the middle or you've been doing it for a long time, you are either aware of or you're going to be part of what's called the preparedness cycle. Super easy to understand. The preparedness cycle happens like this. You hear some scary news and all of a sudden you're motivated. You're feeling the fear, right? Your heart is pumping. You're going, oh man, I got to get prepared for emergencies. So you run to the store and you buy what everybody else is buying because that's what the news makes you do, right? If everyone's getting all the toilet paper and they're all getting cleared out, you buy more toilet paper. You try to get as quick as you can. If they're buying bottled water, you get that. If they're getting Oreos, you get Oreos, right? Whatever people are afraid of, losing out on, right? FOMO, they end up going out and getting, even if it's the wrong thing to do. That's what people do. A lot of times you don't even know what you're doing. So you get there and all of a sudden, sometimes the shelves are empty, sometimes there's stuff there. But as soon as the news gets better again, or you get used to the news, because I can't tell you how many times here in our stores, the news will get bad and people just come in droves. And a week later, week and a half, 2 weeks later, even though things haven't gotten any better, people just get used to the news, so they stop coming. But once the news gets better or you get used to it, then all of a sudden it's back to normal. Even if you just barely started getting prepared for emergencies, it's back to normal until the news hits again. And all of a sudden you feel scared again. And then you go back and get some more supplies until the news gets better or you get used to it. That's called the preparedness cycle or the preparedness vicious cycle because it's just not a good place to be. And I'm going to break you out of that in this course. We're actually going to get to a point where you're doing it out of faith instead of fear. You're not doing it haphazardly. You're actually doing it in a systematic 7-step order to get through preparedness and be able to do literally more than what most people do in 10 to 15 years. You're going to be able to do it in just a few months. You're going to be able to stand on the shoulders of myself and my coaches who've been doing this literally for 15, 20, 25,000 hours of experience, right? For 20, 30 years of doing preparedness, for having $200,000, $300,000 of mistakes. You're going to be able to stand on our shoulders and see a lot further without that. And so I'm going to encourage you just to keep going. Now the preparedness cycle happens like this. The first time you hear the bad news, you go out and you buy some canned food, some bottled water, some staples, some toilet paper from the store, and you think, okay, I'm pretty prepared. But all of a sudden you find out the next time it scares you that there's more things like grab and go kits and generators and you're thinking, well, you know, now I got to grab and go, kid. I got my family, and things are getting pretty bad, and there's some riots happening out there. So I probably should get some type of protection or a gun or something to protect my family. But then the next time the vicious cycle happens and the news gets bad, you're like, oh man, I got to get more prepared. So you go to YouTube and you go to your Facebook groups and you start talking to your friends and trying to Google ideas and you go to stores and call stores and you message your friends back and forth and like, what do I do? How do I do it? And what's happening is you're finding out so much more about preparedness, and you didn't know that there's first aid, medical, shelter, transportation, sanitation, more food, gardening. Communication just goes on and on and on. And then you find out about 25-year shelf life foods. Oh my goodness, I don't have to switch out that food for a long time. But then you find out that there's words called up to 25-year shelf life foods. And a lot of those foods, probably about 90-95% of those foods go bad probably in about 3 to 7 years. Or you just can't handle eating them because they're horrendously gross and you prepared the wrong way. But then you find out about water tanks and man-made and natural disasters all over the place that you didn't even know about, and survival supplies. But then you find out that you were learning the wrong stuff, and it's the blind leading the blind, and it just gets so confusing and so depressing because there's more stuff and more stuff, more YouTube. And when you go to one channel, they say something, go to another channel, they say the opposite, and you're getting more confused. And it's a lot of wasted time and a lot of research and a lot of money going down the drain. Just a ton of money going down the drain. And the list never ends. It gets depressing. And instead of feeling excited about preparedness in the end, you're depressed. You're discouraged. You don't want to do it anymore. It's like, it's so overwhelming. It makes you feel like you're drowning. And it shouldn't be that way. Because you're caught between two places. You're trying to figure out, do I not prepare? Because if I don't prepare, then all of a sudden I feel vulnerable and stressed and unsafe and worried and insecure. But if I get prepared and have to go through all this preparedness cycle stuff, I feel overwhelmed, stressed, unmotivated. You're wasting tons of time and money and making all these mistakes. And it's depressing. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's what this course is all about, this whole Thrivalist course. That if you know exactly what to do, you know what skills to learn, you know what knowledge to gain, you know who to connect to, all of a sudden you can get prepared in 90 days or less without all the stress, without all the worry, and you can feel the peace that comes from being prepared. Now in our industry, it's really interesting because we have two main groups, and you probably know what they are. You've heard about them. There's preppers, and then there's survivalists. Now, when I've gotten out there and spoken to huge groups and everything else, I ask people, what's the difference between a prepper and a survivalist? And nobody really has any good definitions. I mean, I go online and I ask, you know, I try to find out from groups and everything, from online groups, and I search the internet, blogs and everything else, trying to find out what's the definition of a prepper and a survivalist. There's no common definition. So I finally created one. It's super easy. A prepper is somebody who focuses on supplies over skills. And a survivalist is somebody who focuses on skills over supplies. It's really easy. But the problem is, when people hear preppers and survivalists, either they love it, like I'm a prepper, I'm a survivalist, or they hate it. You know, they don't want to be a part of it. It's kind of like a little bit scary to be a part of that group, right? And what's interesting is this. The reason they don't want to be part of the prepper group is because they don't want to be known as hoarders or extremists. And the reason they don't want to be part of the survivalist group is because they don't want to be known as militants or minimalists. And what I mean by militants is, you know, a whole bunch of guns in the house, maybe no supplies except for guns and bullets, and they're going to take everybody else's supplies, or they're going to shoot. And what I mean by militants is they have a whole bunch of bullets and guns inside their house, and they're going to shoot anybody who comes close to their house or take somebody else's supplies. And what I mean by minimalist is that they really don't feel like they need to buy anything or get any supplies because they know how to live off the land, right? And what's fascinating about that is neither one of them are the right thinking. They're in the right direction, but they're not completely the right thinking, because you have to have the right amount of supplies and skills to make it through an emergency. And so I was at a so I was at a survival camp, one of the top in the nation, and I was talking to a guy while we were walking inside the and I was talking to a guy while we were walking in the and I was talking to a guy while we were walking in the parking lot, and he said something interesting to me. He said, "You know, Marcelo, that preparedness stuff, all those supplies, that's really cool and everything, but I really don't need that. I know how to survive in the wilderness." And I asked him, "But why would you do that to your family? Why? I mean, you have the ability right now to go out and buy supplies, to stock them up, and to get everything in place, because you know as well as I do that as soon as all the neighborhood dogs and cats are gone and there's no other food in the stores and everything else, it's going to take you 6+ hours per person in your family to be able to find enough food just to keep going every single day. It's a mathematical impossibility when you have 3 or 4 kids. So why don't you just go get the supplies right now, put them away, and if you never need to use them during an emergency, awesome. You know, congratulations, you're able to use all your awesome skills and get through an emergency without ever dipping into the supplies. But if you can't even find the supplies, then at least you have a backup." He said, "You know, you're right. You know, there's no honor in being macho when your kids are starving." And so I suggested to him, just get the supplies and use your skills. But on the flip side, he has an advantage, because say all your supplies get taken because some big riot happened and people broke into your house, or your house got burned down or whatever. If you don't have any skills, you're not going to make it as well. So that's where we have to bring in both the supplies and the skills. So the preppers got it right, the survivalists got it right. But if you bring them together, all of a sudden you can feel the peace, the faith, the security. You don't have to feel insecure anymore, right? Vulnerable anymore, right? Because you have the right things in place. You can make it either way. And that's what's called a thrivalist. That's why thrivalist.com, right? Thrivalist. Is what we're building out there, teaching people a positive word to get prepared for emergencies the right way, thriving during an emergency, not just surviving during an emergency, which can be a little bit negative. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard of the 80-20 rule. Hopefully you have. 80%, 20%. What that means is the following, and I'll give an example. About a year ago, my wife and I ended up moving into a new house. I don't know if any of you have ever moved into a new house, but I'm sure you can relate to this. We ended up taking all the boxes, putting them in the middle, opening them up, pulling things out, sticking them in drawers and cabinets, and we did probably 80% of the unpacking within a few weeks, maybe a couple months, and the house looks pretty good right now. But there's about 20% a year later, papers I haven't gone through, I haven't had time to, things I just still haven't unpacked in the garage. You know, I probably should just throw those things away because I haven't used them in a year. But there's about 20% I just haven't gotten to. It just takes forever to get to. Well, preparedness is exactly the same way, exactly. What happens is this: you can get 80% of your preparedness done, which literally is about 500% more than most people do after 10 to 15 years. You can get about 80% of your preparedness done within 90 days. You know, instead of learning how to do a bow drill fire, I just tell you, go buy some matches, get a lighter, you know, instead of learning crazy things like I'm learning at this point in my life, all these little tiny skills that take a lifetime, the 20%, right? A lifetime to learn. Just get the essentials in place so that if an emergency happens, just go get the essentials in place so that if an emergency happens, you know, in 90 days from now and you're prepared, you can handle it. You can take it. You don't need all the little skills and all the little tiny bits of knowledge that I'm gaining at this point in my life, because you have enough to get through. That's the 80%. And so I'm going to encourage you to actually get through the 7%. So I'm going to encourage you to get through the 7 steps of preparedness. Just implement them. Get through it. Get it done in 30 days. Get it done in 90 days or less. You can do this in 30 days or less. This course is so streamlined that you can get it done in 30 days or less, but 90 days is the goal. Just get it done. Don't finish. Just get it done. Don't quit until you get it done. Now, there's a story I heard a while ago about a famous writer that motivated me. It was a famous writer that wrote his friend and said, "Man, sorry for the long letter. If I had more time, it would have been shorter." Well, that's exactly what I did with this course. I spent thousands, literally thousands of hours putting this course together. And the reason why it took thousands of hours to put together is because I took all these principles in preparedness, all this. And the reason it took, there's a story I heard a while ago about a famous writer who wrote his friend and said, "Sorry for the long letter. If I had more time, it would have been shorter." And that motivated me when I heard it, because I was like, it does me no service to put out a huge, gigantic, long course and a gigantic book you got to read to help families get prepared. No one's going to do it. I wouldn't do it. We're busy. People, you have kids, you have jobs, you have all these things you need to do. So I spent thousands of hours literally putting together this course in a streamlined fashion so that you can get it. There's a story I heard a long time ago about a famous writer who wrote his friend and said, "Sorry for the long letter. If I had more time, it would have been shorter." And that story motivated me to do this course the right way, because it does no service to you as a family. Ooh, man, I'm getting tired. Okay, let's do it. We can do this. I'm almost done. Okay, let's see. There's a story I heard a while ago about a famous writer who wrote his friend and said, "Sorry for the long letter. If I had more time, it would have been shorter." And I thought, there's a principle in that when it comes to making courses, because if I put out all the stuff I know in a long form with tons of long videos and huge, gigantic book you had to read, nobody would get it done. I wouldn't even do it. And that just does a big disservice for families that are trying to get prepared. And so what I did is I literally ended up spending 3,000 hours before putting together the course, and now I'm spending another 1,000 hours redoing this course to be able to teach the stuff I've learned over the last 6-7 years since I did the first course, to be able to teach you the best stuff in preparedness. But the hard part is taking really complex principles and making them so easy that by the time you hear it, you think, "I already knew that," but you didn't. Just like I showed you the thing about the preppers and survivalists and defined preppers and survivalists. As soon as you heard that, you're like, "Yeah, that makes sense," as if you knew it the whole time, but you didn't. And so that's the key of making a course a great course, is streamline it so that you actually can finish it, so that you actually can learn what you need to learn to be able to thrive, right? To be able to grow in whatever you're learning. And so that's exactly what I did with this course. Now, in this course, my big goal is not only to get you prepared, but also to replace your fears, because a lot of people get prepared out of fear, and I want to get you to the point where you're doing it out of faith. I don't feel the fear, okay? I've got a ton of supplies, and if God told me to give away all my supplies and start over, I would, because I trust Him enough, right? I'm not being motivated by fear, and I have enough skills now and have enough knowledge to be able to start over pretty quickly. And so what I'm going to show you is what you need to be able to replace those fears, and this course does that. It gets you on the pathway. And the first thing is you need the knowledge. Second, you need the right supplies. Third, as we talked about, you need the right skills. And finally, you need the right community. And that's what you're getting here in this course that you paid for, that you're part of today. Now, I'm going to share one more story to end this video. And this is a story about back in 2020, when the pandemic had first hit, but it hadn't gotten huge yet, right? It hadn't gotten to March where everybody was going indoors, businesses were starting to close and everything else. I was at a trade show in Las Vegas, and people started talking about this new pandemic that's spreading and everything else. And it was just really interesting watching people, because they were starting to get pretty nervous, and you can feel the energy from other people. They were getting nervous, so I was getting nervous. And they were starting to get away from people, and other people were doing the opposite. They were getting close. "I don't care. I'm not worried about this." But you could tell they were still nervous. Even the people that were showing off were still nervous. And so I started getting more and more anxious at this trade show, thinking, what's going to happen? Like, how bad is this? I mean, are my kids going to die? Am I going to die? And am I going to be able to protect them? What's going to happen? And so what happened at that point is I went home, okay, after that trade show, and I got to my door. Now, this picture I'm showing you right here is not exactly the picture of that time, but it's a representation. It actually shows you what I was feeling when I walked inside the house, because as soon as I passed my door, I remembered I'm prepared. I felt the feelings of the house. I felt the joy of being there. And I just felt so much peace, and I felt like everything is good. I didn't have to run to the store for toilet paper because I had years and years worth of toilet paper put away because you're going to use it anyways. Why not just get it ahead of time, right? So I did. And so it was just, it was a peaceful feeling. And that's what you're going to be able to feel by doing this course. You're going to be able to feel that security that comes from being prepared. You're going to replace fear with faith. And so I want to congratulate you for being on this course, for showing up, for doing this. And I'm going to encourage you, don't quit. Get to the next video right now. Don't finish right here. Just keep going. Get through this introduction section and understand what the course is all about. So congratulations again, and I'll see you on the next video.